The rain poured heavily that night, soaking through his thin shirt and clinging to his skin, as if even the sky wanted him to feel the weight of rejection. His body trembled not only from the cold but from the crushing words that still echoed. In his mind, words from the man he had hoped would finally see him as a son. "You are not mine. Leave this place and never return." He had walked out of the massive golden gates of the mansion, his bare feet slipping on the wet stone as the guards shut the iron doors behind him. The sound of that slam felt like the final heartbeat of a dream that had never truly lived. He stumbled into the empty street, his hair plastered to his forehead, his lips dry though rain slid over them, his eyes burning as tears mixed with the storm. He looked back once, through the black iron bars, seeing nothing but the glow of chandelier inside and the faint sound of laughter, the world of riches that had just closed itself off to him. He sank down on the curb, the water rushing past his toes. He pressed his forehead into his knees, and for a moment he thought he might collapse completely, but something deep inside him refused to let him break. Memories flooded him, memories of hunger, of scraping through garbage cans as a child, of clutching his mother's weak hands as she lay dying, whispering that his father was alive somewhere, a powerful man, a man who might save him, a man who might give him the life she never could. She had told him to search, she had told him to fight, she had told him to never stop believing, and he had found the truth. He had found the name, the billionaire with the empire of steel and glass, the tycoon with influence that stretched across nations, the man whose blood ran in his veins. But tonight that man had looked at him with cold eyes, eyes that felt like knives, and denied him, denied the years of pain, denied the love he had begged for, denied even the truth of his birth. His heart twisted with a grief so sharp it almost stopped him from breathing. Yet beneath it was a flicker of something else, something darker, the fire of betrayal. The street was silent except for the roar of the rain and the occasional distant honk of a car. But then came the creak of leather shoes splashing into the water. A stranger had stopped under an umbrella, looking down at him. "Why are you sitting in the storm like this?" the voice asked. Calm yet edged with curiosity, the boy lifted his head slowly, his hair falling back from his eyes, and for the first time someone saw, not just a poor boy, but a young man with fire burning in his soul. "Because I was just thrown away," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thrown away by my own blood." The man with the umbrella studied him, and in that gaze there was recognition, almost fear, but it vanished quickly, replaced by something unreadable. "You should leave this street before it swallows you whole," the man said, and without another word, he turned and walked into the night. The boy sat frozen, the words haunting him, the figure disappearing like a shadow into the mist of the rain. And deep inside he felt the strange sense that this was not the last time he would see him. He rose slowly, his legs heavy, but his spirit slowly igniting. The storm above thundered. As if echoing the storm inside his chest, he walked away from the mansion, each step carrying him further from the rejection, but closer to something else, something he could not yet name. At the corner of the street he stopped, his hand brushing against the pocket of his soaked pants. He pulled out a crumpled photograph, the only thing his mother had left him, a picture of her holding him as a baby. Smiling faintly though, her eyes carried sorrow. On the back of the photo was written a name, his father's name, the same man who had just denied him. His throat tightened as he whispered, "Mother, he does not want me, but I will not let your words die. I will make him regret." The promise fell into the night like a spark, and though no one heard it, the universe seemed to shift. Lightning split the sky, and in its flash he saw his reflection in a puddle at his feet, not a weak boy but someone who could rise, someone who could transform pain into power, someone who could turn rejection into revenge. Yet revenge was only a shadow of what burned in him. Deeper still was the longing to prove that he existed, to prove that he mattered. He walked for hours until the city lights blurred into darkness, his body aching, but his mind replaying every word his father had spoken. He imagined storming back through those gates one day, not as a beggar but as someone untouchable, as someone the world respected, as someone who would no longer ask for acceptance but would demand it. By the time the rain eased, dawn was beginning to touch the sky. His clothes clung to his skin, his eyes hollow but alive. He found himself in front of an abandoned warehouse. Broken windows staring down like hollow eyes. Something about it pulled him in. He pushed open the rusty door, the hinges groaning. Inside was nothing but shadows and dust, but it felt safer than the streets. He dropped down onto the cold concrete floor, his head resting against the wall, and closed his eyes. But before sleep could claim him, the door creaked again. Soft footsteps echoed inside, and his heart jumped. He sat up quickly, every muscle tense. A voice whispered from the darkness, "So the son has finally been rejected." Just as expected, his blood ran cold. His breath caught in his throat, and the realization hit him like thunder. Someone had been watching. Someone had known. Someone was waiting for this moment. The shadow stepped closer, and he saw a faint glimmer of eyes staring at him through the dim light. And then the voice said quietly, "Do you want the truth, or do you want revenge?" The boy's chest heaved, his hands clenched into fists, and though fear gripped him, He felt the beginning of a choice that could change everything. The warehouse walls seemed to close in, the silence between them thick, the rain outside softening to a whisper, and in that moment the boy knew one thing. Nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The question hung in the dark, like a blade, truth or revenge. The boy tasted both on his tongue, and felt how each burned in a different way. He lifted his head and met the eyes of the stranger who hid in the shadows, and he said in a steady voice that surprised even himself, "I want both. I want the truth so I know what I am fighting, and I want revenge so I can stop this pain from ruling me." Soft laughs slipped from the darkness. Not cruel, not kind, only tired. The figure stepped closer. A face slowly formed from the gloom, a woman in her 30s with rain in her hair and old bruises fading along her cheek. She held no umbrella, only a small leather notebook pressed to her chest as if it were a shield. "My name is Mara," she said, "and I used to work for your father, the man who denied you at his gates." The word used dug into him like a nail. He stared, breathing quick. "What did you do for him? Why are you here? Why are you watching me?" he asked. The questions flowing out like the rain that still whispered against the roof. Mara moved to a broken window, where the streetlight bled a thin ribbon of gold into the warehouse. "I was his personal aide. I arranged meetings, moved money, kept secrets, until I would not keep one secret anymore. Then I was gone." She tapped the notebook with one finger. "This little book is why I still breathe and why I can stand here. It holds things your father would burn cities to erase." The boy felt the room tilt. He swallowed hard and pushed himself to standing, the ache in his legs forgotten. "What secret did you refuse to keep? Did he always know about me? Did he know about my mother?" His throat tightened around the word mother. He forced it out anyway. "Did he know she was sick? Did he know we were starving? Did he know we begged for help?" Mara watched him in silence, the kind of silence that respects grief and does not rush it. Then she opened the notebook. Inside were clipped photographs, names, dates, and one picture he knew at once. His mother, younger and alive, a staff badge pinned to her uniform, the logo of the Hale Group printed above her heart. The boy touched the photo with trembling fingers. "My mother worked for him," he whispered. "All this time, she was inside his world, and then she died outside." Itmara nodded slowly. "Yes, and more. Your mother was not just staff. She was a researcher on a charity project he funded to clean water for poor neighborhoods. She was bright and brave, and then she left after something happened that nobody would speak about. Money moved the next day. Contracts changed, and a silence fell like a curtain. I asked questions. I was told to stop. I did not stop, and that was the end of my job." The boy felt fury rush through him, hot and clean, like fire finding dry wood. He reached for the notebook, but Mara drew it back. "With care." "Not yet," she said. "You need to understand the board you are walking onto. Your father is not just a man, he is a fortress built from fear and favors. If you charge blindly, your anger will feed his dogs and nothing more. You must be smarter than that. You must want the truth, even when it hurts." He looked at her, at the quiet resolve in her posture, at the old bruise that told a story she had not yet spoken. "I want the truth," he said, and this time the word felt like an oath. "Tell me everything. Start with why he denied me tonight." Mara took a breath that sounded like someone returning from deep water. "He denied you because the board is watching. A scandal would cost him power. But there is another reason, and it is darker. A clause buried in the family trust. If any child outside the marriage claims him publicly, a section triggers and power shifts to another pair of hands." She paused, her eyes searching his. "Do you know who that pair of hands belongs to?" The boy shook his head, his fingers curling. "Who?" he asked, even though a cold guess had already started to form. The image of the umbrella man sliding through rain like a shark beneath black water. The heir favored by the clause is not the polished son in the magazines, not the smiling daughter who appears at charity galas. Mara said, "The clause points to someone invisible in the company. A fixer, a handler, the man who moved between the gates tonight with a face no one remembers. His name is Rowan, and he will do anything to keep his place in the shadows, because in the shadows he holds the strings." The boy tasted metal on his tongue. "That man told me to leave the street before it swallowed me," he said. "Why would he warn me if he wants power?" Mara shook her head. "It was not a warning, it was a claim. He was telling you that this street belongs to him now, and that you should get off it if you hope to live. He does not need you dead, yet, only gone. But if you become a noise too loud to ignore." His hands are practiced. The warehouse felt smaller, as the shape of danger grew. The boy pressed his palms against the cold wall and breathed. Then he turned back. "What do we do?" he asked. "What do I do? Tell me how to fight a man who owns everything. Tell me how to fight without becoming like him." Mara's mouth tightened. "First you eat," she said, and the simplicity of it surprised him, enough to make him let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. She pulled a paper bag from her coat. Inside was a still warm sandwich and a bottle of water. He ate like he had not eaten in days, because he had not, and as the food settled in his empty belly, he felt his head clear just enough to see the world, with sharp edges again while he ate. Mara spoke. "Tomorrow we go to a place the public never sees. an underground archive where old contracts live like bones in a graveyard. If we find your mother's resignation letter, if we find the charitable project records, we might see what was silenced and why, and then we can decide whether to bleed your father with truth or break him with fear. But you must also choose a name for yourself, not the name he gave you by blood, a name you will carry as armor until you are ready to step into the light. The boy looked down at his soaked shirt and his shaking hands. A name formed on his tongue that felt like a bridge between what he had been and what he needed to become. Call me Ash, he said, because I burned tonight and I am still here. Mara nodded once, as if the name satisfied some measure she kept inside her. Then she showed him a small phone with a cracked screen. It contained only one app and one contact labeled with a single word. Mother Ash stared at it, shock rippling out from his chest. How? He whispered. How do you have this? My mother is gone. Her grave is the only place that knows her name. Now Mara touched the phone with a reverence that spoke of grief. She left this with a friend who left it with me when she disappeared. 3 messages are locked behind a code I do not know. They are set to open only when voice recognition hears your tone. Your mother was a scientist. She believed in physical safes. She believed that one day you would stand where you are now. She believed you would need a map, and she believed someone might try to destroy it. Ash reached for the device as if it were a living thing, his heart beat loud in his ears. Say your name, Mara whispered, and see what your mother saved for you. He said his name, the new name he had chosen. The phone trembled in his hand with a small vibration, then another. Then the lock rolled away like a tide, and a video opened. The screen lit the darkness. His mother's face appeared, tired yet beautiful, eyes brave and frightened at the same time. Ash's knees nearly gave out. He sank to the floor as her voice filled the warehouse. My son, if you are hearing this, the world did not protect you, so listen carefully. I tried to keep you from this war, but men with suits and smiles pulled us into it. Your father did not save us, but he is not the enemy you think. The enemy is the man who feeds on secrets. His real name is not the one the company knows. He carries many names, like knives. Trust the woman who gave you this. She was kind to me, when others were not, and know this last thing, the rejection you felt was not the end, it was a door. And behind that door is a document that can undo the men who own your father. Find the letter named Project Amaranth. Find the second page with the missing signature, and you will understand why I left the video cut out with a small flicker. Ash stared at the spot where his mother's face had been, the word Amaranth ringing through him like a bell. Mara knelt beside him, her expression steady. There it is, she said, the map. The graveyard we need is beneath the oldest hell office. There is a locked room with a metal door and a keypad with worn numbers. I know the path, but I do not know if we can make it and still walk out. Rowan has eyes everywhere, and he keeps a ledger of debts paid in fear. Ash rose, a new strength pulling his spine straight. If my mother walked out once, if she believed I could do this, then I will try, he said, his voice rough but clear. We go tonight, before the city wakes, before Rowan starts to wonder where the poor boy wandered off to. Mara studied him for a long second, then she nodded. Tonight, we move. They traveled through the city like shadows, using alleys and old tram tunnels. The rain eased to a mist, and the sky began to pale. The oldest Hale office stood like a stone ship at the river edge, columns at the front, a bronze plaque that time had stained green. Mara led him to a side entrance where a security camera should have watched. Its lens was cracked, a small miracle or a careful plan. Ash could not tell which. They slipped inside. The air smelled of paper and dust and cold metal. They moved past rows of filing cabinets and framed photos of men shaking hands with other men. Every image smiled with a mouth that did not reach the eyes. Mara stopped at a door that looked like any other, but the keypad beside it showed a pattern of wear on 3 numbers. She pressed them in a sequence. It failed. She tried again. It failed. Again. Rowan changes codes often, she whispered. He is not smart, but he is careful. Ash held the phone his mother had left. He opened the second message, a still image of a sketch. His mother's handwriting in the margins. Numbers circled with small hearts as if she knew she might only have a moment to hide a code inside a memory. Ash traced the hearts. 3 numbers revealed themselves. He entered them, and the light turned green. The door clicked open with a sigh. Like a vault releasing old air. Inside was a narrow room with shelves that reached the ceiling. Boxes labeled in tidy script. Legal, funding, donors, and then one box hidden behind others. Its label simple and strange. Amaranth. Mara's breath caught in her chest. She reached for it, and Ash helped her lower it to the floor. Inside were files bound with red thread. They untied one bundle and unfolded the first letter. The words swam before Ash's eyes. His mother's signature on the first page, a gap on the second where another name should live, a missing signature. That turned the whole project into a ghost, and a note scribbled in a margin that said, payment diverted by R. Cover with clean funds. Keep quiet or pull the ladder. R. Ash whispered. Rowan, Mara said, her voice almost a growl. He stole the money meant for water filters and pushed the blame onto your mother. Then he made your father sign a press release about transparency while he built a private door into the trust. This is more than scandal, this is a crime with bones and teeth. We can take this to the authorities. We can take this to the board. We can. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. 2 sets, crisp and certain. Mara and Ash looked at each other. Her eyes said run, his said stand. The door handle turned with slow confidence, and a voice Ash knew from the rain slid through the gap like cold air. Leave the box on the floor and step away, Rowan said. We will pretend you never touched it. We will pretend you never existed. At all, Ash felt fear rise like a wave, and he stood against it, his hands shaking but not moving from the file. He looked at Mara. She gave the smallest nod, a promise and a warning. Then Ash lifted the second page high, where the light could catch it. The missing signature, a white wound against black ink. Rowan stepped fully into the room with 2 security men at his back, his eyes flat and bright like glass marbles. Do not make the mistake of believing paper can save you, he said. In my world, paper burns, and people who carry it burn with it. Ash took a breath that scraped his lungs. Then he spoke, his voice stronger than he felt. I am not the beggar you met in the rain, he said. I am the son of the woman you tried to erase. I am the proof you did not kill her. Voice, and I have what you fear. Rowan smiled, a thin curve that did not touch his eyes. You have a piece of a puzzle, he said. I have the rest and a match. Mara moved half a step forward. Not one more, she said. Not one more threat to this boy. Not one more stolen life. I will bury you with your own secrets. Rowan's gaze slid to her. Recognition flashed like a knife. Ah, Mara, the assistant who forgot her place. He whispered, I always wondered where you scurried off to. How kind of you to bring the boy to me. It saves me the work of fishing him out of the river later. His hand flicked in a signal. One guard stepped forward. Ash felt the room squeeze around him. He lifted the page higher, his pulse roaring, and in that instant a new voice boomed from the corridor. A voice that froze every muscle in the room. Leave the boy, the voice commanded, and you will answer to me. The speaker stepped into view. Expensive suit, rain still clinging to his shoulders, eyes like storm glass. It was the billionaire himself, Victor Hale, the father who had denied him at the gates. He looked at Rowan first, and there was no warmth in that look. Then his gaze moved to Ash, and something like pain cracked the mask he wore. You were told to leave, he said quietly. Why did you come back? Schott stood with the page in his trembling hands, caught between the man who had rejected him and the man who had hunted him. The truth he had found in the box, whispering like a fuse. The room held its breath as Victor stepped closer. Rowan smiled his thin smile and shifted his weight toward the match he always carried. And Ash realized in one blazing instant that the shocking twist might not be the rejection at the gate. It might be the answer that now trembled on his father's tongue. And before any of them could move, Victor Hale said a sentence that turned the floor beneath Ash to air. The boy you claim to be is not my heir by blood, Victor said, but his silence cracked under the weight of his words. Not my heir by blood, the only one I trust to save my life. Now, Ash stared at Victor Hale and felt anger and confusion surge together like 2 rivers meeting in a storm. Mara shifted closer to him, her body a thin wall between Ash and the men. With hard eyes, Rowan stood with his thin smile. The guards waited. The room breathed like a living beast. Why me? Ash asked, his voice rough yet steady. Why trust a boy you threw to the rain? Victor's gaze did not flinch. Because I did what I had to do at the gate, he said, because powerful ears were listening. And because the only person who can pull the fuse without triggering the blast is the one who stands outside my blood and still carries your mother's voice inside. His heart. Rowan's smile thinned into a blade. Poetic, he said, yet useless. The boy is a storm without a map. Hand me the file and I might let him keep his name. Victor did not look at Rowan. He lifted a hand instead. A ring on his finger flashed under the ceiling light. The guards hesitated. One stepped back, one stayed firm. The air filled with the scent of old paper and cold metal, and fear. Mara spoke fast and low. Do not let them split us, she whispered to Ash. Your mother left you more than a memory. The phone is a key. The file is the door. Victor turned to her then. Something like shame flickered through his face. You were the only one who brought flowers to her desk when she cried after Amaranth collapsed. He said, I know who kept her human when my world tried to turn her into a number. Ash's heart lurched at that. Grief pressed hard against his ribs. He held up the second page where the missing signature glared like a wound. My mother said to find this, he said. She said the second page would explain why she left. Victor nodded. It does. It points to the man you think is untouchable. It points to the hand that moved money from clean water to dirty pockets. It points to R. And there is only one R in this room who writes like a ghost. Rowan laughed. A small sound like a match flicking against a box. Letters are fog, he said. You will drown in them while I walk away on stones. He looked at the guard who still stood close. Remove the page from the boy's hand. If he resists, break the fingers he used to hold it. The guard took a step. Mara slid in front of Ash, her shoulders squared. Not one more inch, she said. I will scream, and the whole floor will come running. Rowan raised an eyebrow. Then do it, he said. I own the running feet in this building. Victor moved between them with a suddenness that startled everyone. Stand down, he ordered. The guard faltered. Rowan's eyes narrowed. You do not give orders here anymore, he murmured. Not with the clause in place, not with the board's donors pressing your throat. Victor did not blink. You forget one thing, he said. The clause is a theater play. The stage burns if the audience sees the wires, and I am tired of pretending there are no wires. He turned to Ash again. Your mother put a phrase in her video. Did you hear it? Find the letter named Project Amaranth. Find the second page with the missing signature. Then you will understand why I left. In that sentence was a code. 5 words. Find the second page. The door will respond to those words. In her voice, Ash looked at the steel walls, confusion tightening. Like a knot. A door. What door? The door you cannot see. Victor said. Rowan built a panic system into these archives. Speak the phrase, and our world will shift. Ash lifted the cracked phone. His hands trembled. He opened the third message. A blank screen and a single line of text. Speak the words as I spoke them, son. Then trust what opens. Ash swallowed. He remembered the soft cadence of his mother's voice, the slight lift at the end when she tried to sound calm for him. He spoke into the air. Find the second page with the missing signature. And the wall behind the shelves clicked like a lock, releasing breath that had held for years. A panel slid aside to reveal a narrow corridor. Cold air washed over them with the smell of riverstone. Rowan's face hardened. Close it, he snapped. Now, Victor smiled for the first time, not cruel, only tired. The system listens only to her voice or to the voice of her child, he said, and you did not think she would hide a tunnel inside your safe room. Rowan signaled the guard again, but the man hesitated, sweat beaded at his temple. Fear moved in the room, like a new shadow. Mara touched Ash's elbow. Go, she whispered, take the page and go. I will hold them as long as I can. Ash shook his head, leaving her felt like tearing skin from bone. But Victor was already moving toward the panel. Come now, he said, and his voice held a plea that did not sound like a billionaire's command. Ash stepped backward into the corridor, the second page pressed against his chest. Mara followed. Rowan lunged and caught her sleeve. His fingers dug in like hooks. Victor grabbed Rowan's wrist with the speed that belied his age. The two men locked in a silent struggle that ended with Rowan pulling free and signaling the guard with a jerk of his head. The guard lifted a baton. Ash grabbed a heavy ledger from a shelf and flung it. The book struck the baton and cracked it from the guard's grip. Mara yanked her arm free and stumbled into the corridor. Ash hit the panel button he could barely see. The wall slid closed. Rowan's voice cut off mid-order. The silence that followed was like the deep sea in Ash's ears. The corridor lights hummed. A soft strip along the floor. Victor leaned against the wall and breathed hard. A sheen of sweat shining on his forehead. Ash felt a tight bolt of fear. Are you hurt? He asked. Victor nodded once, then shook his head as if to clear it. Poison, he said in a low voice, slow and polite, given over months, by a man who keeps my schedule and knows my tea. Rowan is not killing me fast. He is killing me quiet. Mara stared at Victor as if seeing him new. You knew, and you kept showing up at the office. She said. Why? Victor's eyes clouded. Because if I did not, he would go after my children, and after people like you, and after the son I thought I had already lost. He looked at Ash. Tonight I realized that in trying to keep you safe I had buried you alive. And that is not safety. That is cowardice. Ash swallowed against a lump that almost stopped him from breathing. The corridor opened into a small chamber like the inside of a safe. Steel table, one chair bolted to the floor, a glass case on the wall with a thumb scanner and an old-fashioned keyhole. Mara studied it. 2 locks, she said, one for the man with the ring, one for the woman who knew how to look at old problems and find simple answers. Victor pressed his ring against the glass. Nothing happened. He laughed softly, humorless and raw. Of course, he said, the ring I wear is a decoy. The real key is the one I do not deserve. Ash peered at the keyhole. It was shaped like a flower. 6 petals, a 7th broken off at the edge. A memory tugged at him. His mother's necklace with a small metal flower, cheap and lovely. He reached into the phone case because Mara had tucked the necklace in there when she first handed him the device. He pulled it out with fingers that shook. The small pendant fit the keyhole as if it had been waiting since the day it was made. He turned the pendant. The glass case opened with a sigh. Inside was a slim folder and a small metal device like a remote with a single button. Victor's breath hitched. The folder first, he said. Ash opened it. Inside lay a signed confession by a donor who had laundered funds through Amaranth under Rowan's direction. It named dates and amounts and held a list of shell companies. A second sheet held a copy of the trust clause with a handwritten note. Clause valid only if no independent claimant presents evidence of diversion tied to internal handler R. Mara looked up, her eyes bright with fierce light. This breaks the clause if we bring it to the right judge, she said. Victor nodded. The metal device will give us time. It is a silent signal to a friend on the board who still has a soul. Press it and he will lock down Rowan's access for 1 hour. No longer. In that hour, we either end this or it ends. Assange took the device and felt its weight like a stone that finally belonged in his hand. Before he could press it, a low alarm throbbed through the walls. Not loud, steady, and deep like a heart that had decided to run. Mara spun toward the corridor. Smoke curled under the panel. Rowan had lit the archives from the outside. Ash's stomach dropped. The documents in the outer room would burn within minutes. Victor leaned hard on the wall. Pain etched new lines into his face. Go back, he said through clenched teeth. Save what you can. I will get you the last thing we need. Mara grabbed his arm. You are not walking back into that smoke, she said. Victor's eyes softened for a heartbeat. I failed a woman once when smoke was rising, he said. I will not fail her son. Ash felt the world tilt again. His mother's face flashed across his mind. The way she used to brush hair from his eyes and say there will be a day when you choose who you are. He lifted the device, pressed the button. A small green light blinked. Somewhere in this city, a man with a soul made a call that would jam Rowan's power for an hour. They shoved the panel. It slid open to a wave of heat. Fire clawed along the rows of boxes like hungry hands. Sprinklers hissed, but the flames leapt anyway. Smoke bit their throats. Mara pulled her sleeve across her mouth. Ash pushed into the room, grabbed the amaranth box. The red threads were hot to the touch. He cradled it like a child. Victor moved behind them, slower, each breath a fight. Rowan stood at the far end, with 2 new guards and a can of fuel at his feet. His smile was gone now, his eyes bright with a fever that was not heat. He lifted a small remote of his own. The door on the street side will lock in 1 minute. He called over the roar. Your time is almost done. Drop what you carry, and I will help the old man find a doctor. His gaze landed on Victor. A doctor who will not ask why his blood tastes like metal. Ash felt a surge of rage so clean it made his hands steady. He looked at Mara. He looked at Victor. He looked at the box in his arms and the second page tucked inside his shirt, and he made a choice. I am done begging, he said, his voice low and heavy. He turned and threw the amaranth box through the smoke toward an open window where night wind pushed against the flames. The box crashed through the glass and fell to the riverwalk outside. Safe from the fire for the moment, Rowan lunged forward with a curse. The guards moved. Mara kicked a cart into their path. Metal screamed against concrete. Victor grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and pulled the pin with shaking hands. A cloud of foam burst outward and turned the air white. Ash ran, leaped over a fallen shelf. Pain tore down his shin. He ignored it and barreled into Rohan. The remote flew from Rowan's hand and skidded under a cabinet. Rowan struck Ash across the face with the back of his hand. Lights burst behind Ash's eyes. He tasted blood and salt. Then he drove his shoulder into Rowan's chest and they slammed into the burning shelf. A roar, like a living thing, rose as a stack of boxes fell. Mara screamed his name. Victor staggered and caught himself on the table. Foam hissed and smoke boiled. The alarm grew louder. Footsteps pounded from the stairwell. More guards. Or maybe men who still remembered right from wrong. Ash did not. No. He shoved himself off Rowan and scrambled to his feet. His lungs burned. His vision swam. He felt for the second page inside his shirt. It was there, hot and real. He grabbed Mara's hand and dragged her toward the broken window. Victor stumbled after them. Rowan laughed even as he coughed. Run, little ghost, he called. The river. It is cold and the night has teeth. They reached the window. Wind lashed rain into their faces. Outside, the riverwalk glistened like a dark mirror. The amaranth box lay on the wet stones below, unburned. Sirens wailed somewhere distant. The street side door clanged as locks engaged. Victor swayed, his skin ashen in the red glow. Mara climbed first, slid down a metal ladder. Ash followed and dropped the last few feet. His ankle screamed. He ignored it. He turned back to help Victor. The older man tried to climb onto the sill and missed. His hand slipped. Ash reached up and caught his wrist. The old ring cut into Ash's skin. Hold on, Ash shouted. Victor's eyes met his. Gratitude and regret and something like pride all at once. I am not the man you needed me to be, Victor said over the roar, but I can be the man who does not let you fall. He shoved the extinguisher into Ash's free hand, and then he did something Ash did not expect. He pushed himself back into the room and turned toward the deeper Fino. Ash shouted, but Victor was already moving. Foam burst again, a white cloud swallowing him. He was going for the inner case, for something Ash had not seen. Maybe another folder, maybe a key to the judge. They needed. Ash pulled himself onto the ladder. Mara steadied him from below. We cannot leave him, Ash said. We cannot. A new sound split the night. A high keen like metal giving way. The ceiling inside the archive groaned. A beam shifted. Flames leaped higher. Rowan's voice rose inside with furious commands and wild laughter. Ash and sparks sprayed out into the rain. Mara grabbed Ash's face with both hands, her fingers smudged with soot. Listen to me, she said, her voice steady, though her eyes shone. With fear, if we go up, we die, and everything your mother left dies with us. If we stay, we can carry her truth to the light. Choose. Ash felt the world narrow to a single painful point. He looked up into the burning window where Victor's shape flickered like a shadow on a wall. He looked down at the box on the stones. That held the proof to break the claws, and the man who had poisoned the city in the dark. He looked at Mara, who had pulled him from the rain and given him back his mother's voice. Sirens grew louder. A boat horn called from the river. The hour he had bought with the device ticked inside his head like a drum. Above them the archive coughed out a new wave of fire. The ladder shook. Voices shouted within the building, and from the smoke there came a sound that froze Ash's blood. The click of a pistol being racked. Rowan appeared at the window with eyes that burned colder than the flames. The pistol rested in his hand as if it had always lived there. He pointed it at Mara first, then at Ash, then at the box on the ground. His smile came back like a thin knife. Time to choose, he said. Save the woman who betrayed me. Save the boy who carries a dead voice, or save the paper that thinks it can cut me. Choose one and drop the others. You have until I count to 3, 2, Rowan said, his voice calm as rain on glass, the pistol steady in his hand. Mara's fingers dug into the ladder, and Ash felt her fear pulse through the metal rungs. The amaranth box lay below them like a lifeline on wet stone. The window above burned like a mouth of fire. 3, Rowan began, and Ash moved, fast and reckless. He yanked the pin on the extinguisher Victor had shoved into his hand and blasted a white storm into Rowan's face. Foam roared like winter. The pistol barked. The shot went wild and cracked brick instead of bone. Mara dropped to the riverwalk with a cry and rolled. Ash leaped after her. Pain tore through his ankle. He landed hard, grabbed the box, and dragged it toward the shadow of the pier as glass rained down from the window above. Rowan coughed and cursed and vanished back into smoke. Guards shouted. Alarms bled through the walls. Victor appeared at the window for one breath of time, his suit dark with soot. Something small and silver flashed in his hand, a capsule no bigger than a thumb. He hurled it down. Ash caught it against his chest. Victor's voice carried through the roar. Find the truth before they find you, and remember the river keeps secrets. Then the ceiling behind him groaned, and the flame swallowed his shape in red and white ash. Staggered, the capsule burned like a coal in his palm. Mara hauled him under the pier. Water slapped the stones. Sirens swelled in the distance like a storm of iron. Above them, the archive floor howled and sagged. A chunk of roof fell and sent a wave of sparks into the night. We have to move, Mara said, her voice frayed but unbroken. He nodded, his throat raw. They shoved the box into a plastic wrap torn from an old banner and tied it tight with red thread like a strange gift. The capsule in Ash's pocket pulsed with a tiny heartbeat of light. He looked down. A single green blink, then another. Slow and steady, as if waiting for an answer, footsteps hammered along the riverwalk. Flashlights slashed the rain. Voices called orders. Not police words, hired men words. Rowan's reach walked on boots and breathed through radios. Mara grabbed the box and motioned toward a culvert where dark water slid into the river. There, she whispered. Ash nodded. They slipped into the tunnel. Cold water rose to their shins. The world narrowed to wet stone, dripping echo, and the drum of their hearts. Behind them, a beam of light cut the culvert mouth. There, someone shouted. 2 figures splashed in. Ash and Mara pressed their backs to the wall and held their breath. A rat skittered past like a shot. The figures swept their lights left and right. One kicked a bottle that clinked and spun, then both cursed and retreated. The radio crackled. Nothing in the drain. Check the pier. Mara exhaled, a thin sound like a thread. Ash squeezed her hand. Thank you, she said without looking at him. He shook his head. No, thank you for pulling me from the rain, he whispered. The memory of his mother's face rose and pressed pain against his ribs. Not now, he told his own heart. Not now. They pushed deeper. The culvert opened into a maintenance tunnel with a rusted gate. Mara pulled a pin from her hair and worked the lock with quick fingers. The gate clicked. They slipped through and swung. It shut. Beyond lay a narrow service corridor that ran beneath the old warehouse district like a forgotten vein. Your device gave us an hour, Mara said, eyes scanning shadows. 40 minutes now maybe. Rowan will lock the streets. He will paint us as thieves and arsonists before sunrise. We need a place he cannot see, and a pair of eyes he does not own. Ash pulled the capsule from his pocket. The green blink was slower now. He looked at the tiny seam around its middle and the faint flower engraving that matched his mother's pendant. Try the necklace, Mara said. He fitted the pendant into the groove and turned. A soft click. The capsule opened like a seed. Inside was a chip no bigger than a nail and a folded note swaddled in wax. He unfolded. The note was shaking hands. The handwriting was careful and exhausted. If you hold this, Victor wrote, then the walls have already turned against us. Take the chip to the only honest judge left on the river circuit. Her name is Amani Kaur. Dock offices at Pier 9. Back stair, 3rd door. She will not open for me. She will open for the woman who brought flowers to a researcher when no one else did. And for the boy that researcher loved. Do not trust uniforms tonight. Some belong to Rowan. The chip holds video of the clause signing and the forged audits. It also holds my statement. One more truth lives in the hospital records. Rowan paid for a switch in the lab that handles paternity samples. If you see a report that tells you the boy is not my blood, know it was written by the same hand that wrote my slow death. Forgive me for the gate. It was a stage I could not keep standing anymore. Ash read the last line again and again. The boy is not my blood. No, it was written by his hand. A cry fought its way up his throat, and he forced it down. Grief and relief crashed together and left him shaking. My mother was right to make me hunt the second page, he whispered, and she was right to make me listen before I burned. Mara squeezed his shoulder. You have more of her in you than your face can show, she said, and now we need to reach Pier 9 before that green light goes dark. They moved through the service corridor, past valves and old pipes that rattled like tired bones. The air tasted of metal and old rain. Somewhere above them, a siren cut off and another began. The city was shifting from night to early morning, the kind of hour when streets change their stories without asking. At a ladder marked with peeling paint, Mara stopped. This climbs to the riverfront near Pier 9, she whispered. But if Rowan has men up top, we will walk into a trap. Ash looked at the capsule. The green blink was slower still, maybe 20 minutes of whatever time the device had promised. He pictured Victor in the heat and smoke, the way the older man had hurled the capsule with shaking hands, the way his eyes had held pride and regret in the same breath. He nodded. We go up, he said, and he slipped the chip and the note into the inner pocket of his soaked shirt. The second page rested against it like a twin blade. They climbed into the mouth of morning. Fog lay over the river like bruised glass. Pier lights blinked through mist. The air was cold and tasted like wet iron. Mara led them along the underside of the boardwalk where shadows hid them from the path above. Then up a short set of steps and into a narrow alley that smelled of brine and diesel. Pier 9 rose ahead, a squat building of brick and corrugated metal, a faded sign for customs and harbor records, a side door with a narrow window wired in old lattice. Ash felt the weight of eyes even before he saw the figures. 2 uniforms at the far end of the alley, hats low, boots clean, to clean for a night like this. Mara's hand tightened on his sleeve. She leaned close. Look at the badge seam on the cap, she whispered. Wrong stitch. Rowan's men dressed as police. Ash felt his pulse steady into something cold and sharp. This is what being hunted feels like, he thought, learning to see the small lies before they reach you. They slipped into a delivery bay and crouched behind crates. The side door into the dock offices was locked. A small camera above it blinked red. Mara lifted the cracked phone, opened a note from his mother with a hand-drawn pattern of numbers and arrows. She traced it across the keypad like a prayer. The lock chirped. The door opened a breath, then stopped. A chain was still on. A voice came soft from inside. Say her name and the reason you are wet with smoke. Mara lifted her chin and spoke without tremor. I brought flowers to the woman in research when everyone else brought rules. And I brought a boy out of the rain because his mother asked me to. The chain slid free. The door opened. A woman in a wool coat and wire-rimmed glasses stood in the gap. Her eyes were the watchful eyes of someone who had heard too many lies and kept only a few truths. Imani Kaur, she said quietly, come in before the masks see you. They stepped into a room that smelled of paper, tea, and old wood. A map of the river hung on one wall. Pinholes like stars marked places where decisions had been made. Imani barred the door and led them through a narrow hall to an office with a single lamp. Ash handed her the chip and the second page. He told her what had burned and what had been thrown to the riverwalk. He told her about the claws, about R, about the panicked door that listened to his mother's voice. His words tangled and then found their path. Imani listened without moving. Then she slid the chip into a small reader and watched the screen. The video lit the room. Victor sat at a table with a lawyer whose eyes kept sliding toward the door. Rowan stood in the corner pretending to be a coat hanger. The claws language scrolled. A hidden camera in the ceiling vent caught signatures, caught a sheet swapped at the last second, caught a nod from Rowan toward the lawyer, caught money handed under a paper sleeve. Imani's mouth tightened. This is ugly and clean, she said. Ugly in act, clean in proof. She clicked to the next file, a recording of Victor's voice. Measured and tired. If I fall, he said, the company must live without rot. This chip and the woman who receives it at Pier 9 are my last line. Protect the boy who arrives with her. His name is not on my will because a forged lab says he is not my blood, but my eyes say what the lab buried. I have been a weak man with strong walls, and now my walls must fall so he can stand. Ash looked away. The word struck something deep and raw. He did not want to cry in front of this judge and this woman who had carried him through fire. He wanted to stand like a man who did not shake, but his eyes burned anyway. Mara put a hand on his back. Imani reached for her coat. We have to move to the courthouse annex, she said. I can file an emergency order to seize the archive and freeze Rowan's authority. But if we step into daylight, he will try to cut us down within the block. She opened a drawer and pulled out a plain badge and a faded jacket. Put this on, walk like you belong, and do not stop. If we are separated, you go to the old rail tunnel and wait under the sign with the blue stripe. If I do not come in 20 minutes, you give the chip to the paper across the street and force the city to watch. The plan was simple and brutal. Ash put on the jacket. His shirt clung wet and cold beneath it. Mara shoved the box under the judge's desk. It will be safe with the clerk, Imani said. The bell rang on the front door. A hard sound. Fists pounded wood. Open up, police. The voice was too loud and too eager. Imani's eyes flicked to the hallway camera. 3 men in uniform stood in the corridor with Rohan behind them in a civilian coat. His smile small and hungry, Imani took a breath and slid the chip into her pocket. Then she took another and smoothed her face into calm. Open the back stair and stand behind me, she whispered. When I speak their false names, run. She walked into the corridor, unbarred the front. The men shouldered in. Their badges flashed like teeth. We have a report, you are sheltering arsonists, one said. Imani raised a hand. Her voice was cool. Names and numbers, officer. The man blinked. He gave a badge number with a cadence too fast. She nodded, as if satisfied, then said quietly, Officer Gray and Officer Pike were suspended last week for falsifying river reports. You are neither of them. You wore their names badly. For the sake of this building, and your own bones, you will step outside. One man laughed, reached for her sleeve. Rowan lifted a palm. Not yet, he said. Judge Kaur, you and I both know that paper is fragile. Hand me the boy and the woman, and this ends with a quiet memo. Refuse, and it ends with a loud incident that ruins your morning. Imani looked him in the eye and smiled without warmth. You brought a counterfeit crew to my pier, she said. Do you know what this building remembers? It remembers real uniforms and real flood nights, and it knows the difference between help and hunger. Then she stepped back, and in the same breath, the hallway lights cut to black, and a metal door slammed down between the officers and the inner rooms. The old harbor office had a storm shutter system after all. Run, she said, and Ash and Mara ran, feet pounding up the back stair. The door at the top banged open into fog and gull cries. A narrow catwalk led to the annex roof. From there a fire escape to the alley. Behind them, the false police hammered on the storm barrier. Rowan's voice coiled up the stairwell like smoke. You can run, little ghost. But the city is a bull, and I hold the rim. They burst into the alley and almost collided with a small woman in a gray scarf and a courier bag. She looked at Mara and Ash, and then at the jacket on Ash's shoulders. Without a word, she thrust car keys into Mara's hand and nodded toward a dented sedan. I owed flowers too, she said. Then she slid away into the fog like a message that had already been read. Mara jammed the key. The engine coughed and caught. They shot out of the alley and onto a back road that curved along the river. The city began to wake. Street vendors pulled up shutters. A bus sighed at a stop. The fog thinned, and the first pale layer of sun touched the water. For a heartbeat, Ash let himself breathe. Then a black SUV slid from a side street and took their rear bumper like a shadow. A second SUV turned ahead. Their path narrowed to a mouth with teeth. Hold tight, Mara said, her voice steady again. She cut down a delivery lane. The sedan rattled and swayed. Boxers toppled in their wake. The capsule in Ash's pocket bumped against his ribs. The green blink, now faint and slow. His hour almost. The note with shaking hands. The handwriting was careful and exhausted. If you hold this, Victor wrote, then the walls have already turned against us. Take the chip to the only honest judge left on the river circuit. Her name is Imani Kaur. Offices at Pier 9. Backstair. Third door. She will not open for me. She will open for the woman who brought flowers to a researcher when no one else did, and for the boy that researcher loved. Do not trust uniforms tonight. Some belong to Rowan. The chip holds video of the clause signing and the forged audits. It also holds my statement. One more truth lives in the hospital records. Rowan paid for a switch in the lab that handles paternity samples. If you see a report that tells you, the boy is not my blood. No, it was written by the same hand that wrote my slow death. Forgive me for the gate. It was a stage I could not keep standing anymore. Ash read the last line again and again. The boy is not my blood. No, it was written by his hand. A cry fought its way up his throat and he forced it down. Grief and relief crashed together and left him shaking. My mother was right to make me hunt the second page, he whispered. And she was right to make me listen before I burned. Mara squeezed his shoulder. You have more of her in you than your face can show, she said. And now, we need to reach Pier 9 before that green light goes dark. They moved through the service corridor, past valves and old pipes that rattled like tired bones. The air tasted of metal and old rain. Somewhere above them a siren cut off, and another began. The city was shifting from night to early morning. The kind of hour when streets change their stories without asking. At a ladder marked with peeling paint, Mara stopped. This climbs to the riverfront near Pier 9, she whispered. But if Rowan has men up top, we will walk into a trap. Ash looked at the capsule. The green blink was slower still. Maybe 20 minutes of whatever time the device had promised. He pictured Victor in the heat and smoke. The way the older man had hurled the capsule with shaking hands. The way his eyes had held pride and regret in the same breath. He nodded. We go up. he said, and he slipped the chip and the note into the inner pocket of his soaked shirt. The second page rested against it like a twin blade. They climbed into the mouth of morning. Fog lay over the river like bruised glass. Pier lights blinked through mist. The air was cold and tasted like wet iron. Mara led them along the underside of the boardwalk where shadows hid them from the path above, then up a short set of steps and into a narrow alley that smelled of brine and diesel. Pier 9 rose ahead, a squat building of brick and corrugated metal, a faded sign for customs and harbor records, a side door with a narrow window wired in old lattice. Ash felt the weight of eyes even before he saw the figures. 2 uniforms at the far end of the alley, hats low, boots clean, too clean for a night. Like this, Mara's hand tightened on his sleeve. She leaned close. Look at the badge seam on the cap. She whispered, wrong stitch. Rowan's men dressed as police. Ash felt his pulse steady into something cold and sharp. This is what being hunted feels like, he thought, learning to see the small lies before they reach you. They slipped into a delivery bay and crouched behind crates. The side door into the dock offices was locked. A small camera above it blinked. Red. Mara lifted the cracked phone, opened a note from his mother with a hand-drawn pattern of numbers and arrows. She traced it across the keypad like a prayer. The lock chirped. The door opened a breath, then stopped. A chain was still on. A voice came soft from inside. Say her name and the reason you are wet with smoke. Mara lifted her chin and spoke without tremor. I brought flowers to the woman in research when everyone else brought rules. And I brought a boy out of the rain because his mother asked me to. The chain slid free. The door opened. A woman in a wool coat and wire-rimmed glasses stood in the gap. Her eyes were the watchful eyes of someone who had heard too many lies and kept only a few truths. Imani Kaur, she said quietly, come in before the masks see you. They stepped into a room that smelled of paper, tea, and old wood. A map of the river hung on one wall. Pinholes like stars marked places where decisions had been made. Imani barred the door and led them through a narrow hall to an office with a single lamp. Ash handed her the chip and the second page. He told her what had burned and what had been thrown to the riverwalk. He told her about the claws, about the panic door that listened to his mother's voice. His words tangled, and then found their path. Imani listened without moving. Then she slid the chip into a small reader and watched the screen. The video lit the room. Victor sat at a table with a lawyer whose eyes kept sliding toward the door. Rowan stood in the corner pretending to be a coat hanger. The claws language scrolled. A hidden camera in the ceiling vent caught signatures, caught a sheet swapped at the last second, caught a nod from Rowan toward the lawyer, caught money handed under a paper sleeve. Imani's mouth tightened. This is ugly and clean, she said, ugly in act, clean in proof. She clicked to the next file. A recording of Victor's voice, measured and tired. If I fall, he said, the company must live without rot. This chip and the woman who receives it at Pier 9 are my last line. Protect the boy who arrives with her. His name is not on my will because a forged lab says he is not my blood, but my eyes say what the lab buried. I have been a weak man with strong walls, and now my walls must fall so he can stand. Ash looked away. The words struck something deep and raw. He did not want to cry in front of this judge and this woman who had carried him through fire. He wanted to stand like a man who did not shake, but his eyes burned anyway. Mara put a hand on his back. Imani reached for her coat. We have to move to the courthouse annex, she said. I can file an emergency order to seize the archive and freeze Rowan's authority, but if we step into daylight, he will try to cut us down within the block. She opened a drawer and pulled out a plain badge and a faded jacket. Put this on. Walk like you belong, and do not stop. If we are separated, you go to the old rail tunnel and wait under the sign with the blue stripe. If I do not come in 20 minutes, you give the chip to the paper across the street and force the city to watch. The plan was simple and brutal. Ash put on the jacket. His shirt clung wet and cold beneath it. Mara shoved the box under the judge's desk. It will be safe with the clerk, Imani said. The bell rang on the front door. A hard sound, fists pounded, would open up. Police. The voice was too loud and too eager. Imani's eyes flicked to the hallway camera. 3 men in uniform stood in the corridor with Rowan behind them in a civilian coat, his smile small and hungry. Imani took a breath and slid the chip into her pocket. Then she took another and smoothed her face into calm. Open the back stair and stand behind me, she whispered. When I speak their false names, run. She walked into the corridor, unbarred the front. The men shouldered in. Their badges flashed like teeth. We have a report. You are sheltering arsonists. One said. Imani raised a hand. Her voice was cool. Names and numbers, officer. The man blinked. He gave a badge number with a cadence too fast. She nodded as if satisfied, then said quietly, Officer Gray and Officer Pike were suspended last week for falsifying river reports. You are neither of them. You wore their names badly, for the sake of this building and your own bones. You will step outside. One man laughed, reached for her sleeve. Rowan lifted a palm. Not yet, he said. Judge Kaur, you and I both know that paper is fragile. Hand me the boy and the woman, and this ends with a quiet memo. Refuse, and it ends with a loud incident that ruins your morning. Imani looked him in the eye and smiled without warmth. You brought a counterfeit crew to my pier, she said. Do you know what this building remembers? It remembers real uniforms and real flood nights, and it knows the difference between help and hunger. Then she stepped back, and in the same breath the hallway lights cut to black, and a metal door slammed down between the officers and the inner rooms. The old harbor office had a storm shutter system after all. Run, she said, and Ash and Mara ran, feet pounding up the back stair. The door at the top banged open into fog and gull cries. A narrow catwalk led to the annex roof. From there a fire escape to the alley. Behind them, the false police hammered. On the storm barrier, Rowan's voice coiled up the stairwell like smoke. You can run, little ghost, but the city is a bowl and I hold the rim. They burst into the alley and almost collided with a small woman in a gray scarf and a courier bag. She looked at Mara and Ash and then at the jacket on Ash's shoulders. Without a word she thrust car keys into Mara's hand and nodded toward a dented sedan. I owed flowers too, she said. Then she slid away into the fog like a message that had already been read. Mara jammed the key. The engine coughed and caught. They shot out of the alley and onto a back road that curved along the river. The city began to wake. Street vendors pulled up shutters. A bus sighed at a stop. The fog thinned and the first pale layer of sun touched the water. For a heartbeat, Ash let himself breathe. Then a black SUV slid from a side street and took their rear bumper. Like a shadow, a second SUV turned ahead. Their path narrowed to a mouth with teeth. Hold tight, Mara said, her voice steady again. She cut down a delivery lane. The sedan rattled and swayed. Boxers toppled in their wake. The capsule, in Ash's pocket, bumped against his ribs. The green blinked, now faint and slow. His hour almost done. He glanced at the side mirror. The SUV behind them held two men. One held a phone to his ear. Rowan's voice would be in that ear like a cold wire. They burst back onto a main road and saw the courthouse annex 2 blocks ahead. A low building. With flags limp in the wet air, a thin crowd moved across the plaza. Early workers, a running club, a man with a coffee cart. Ordinary life flowing like a river that did not know it was about to be dammed. Mara's knuckles whitened on the wheel. Almost there, she said, and the words felt like a prayer. Then a patrol car cut across the intersection and stopped dead. Lights off, doors open, uniforms stepped out with hands resting on holsters. Not the fake stitch this time, these were real. Ash's stomach dropped. Rowan had pulled a string that reached true badges too. Mara slowed, eyes flicking. If we slam through, we become what he says we are. She whispered, if we stop, he takes the chip and the page. Ash looked at the plaza, at the coffee cart, at the flags, at the people who did not know him and did not need to. He felt his mother's voice in his chest like a hand on his back. Carry the truth to the light. He made a choice that scared him because it was not about fighting but about showing. He threw open his door while the car still rolled and stepped into the street with his hands up. His voice rose clear and loud. Judge Kaur has evidence of corporate fraud and a murder attempt inside the annex. He shouted. People turned. Cameras lifted like flowers turning to sun. The real officers froze. Surprised, Mara slammed the brakes and jumped out beside him. She held up her empty hands and shouted to, this boy is a witness and I am a whistleblower from the Hale Group. If we vanish today, remember our faces. The plaza woke with gasps and murmurs. Phone cameras multiplied. The officers glanced at each other. One spoke into his radio. This is Unit 12. We have a situation with cameras. Advise. Static answered. Him, the friend with a soul, had jammed something more. Maybe the 1 hour was not just numbers. Maybe it was a small window of honest silence across a network that usually lied. Rowan's SUV slid up to the curb and stopped. He stepped out in his civilian coat with his small, polite smile. He looked at the crowd and adjusted his face into concern. This young man is unwell, he called. Please step back while we help him. Ash turned so every phone could see the second page in his hand and the pendant at his throat. He felt thousands of eyes. He felt the fear and the courage that live together in men and women who decide to speak. He took one step toward the courthouse annex, then another. The officers shifted but did not reach for him. They were waiting for orders that were not coming. Rowan's mouth tightened. His eyes cut to a man in a baseball cap near the coffee cart. The man moved his hand inside his jacket. Mara saw it and stepped in front of Ash. No, she said, her voice like a blade. And in that instant, a new sound split the plaza. A bell from the annex, a door thrown open. Judge Imani Kaur stood on the top step with a file in one hand and a sheriff. At her back, emergency order filed, she called. Evidence under seal. Any interference in the next 5 minutes will be recorded as obstruction, and every camera here will be evidence. For the first time, Rowan hesitated. Only a breath. But Ash felt the world lean. He and Mara climbed the steps fast. Imani met them halfway, her eyes fierce behind the wire rims. Inside now, she said. The sheriff stepped aside. The door closed behind them with a soft weight. a weight that felt like the first wall on their side. In the anteroom, Imani turned to them. "The chip is in the clerk's safe and the order is live," she said. "The board will feel the freeze within minutes. But listen carefully. The hour you bought is almost done. And men like Rowan do not lose quietly. He will try something that looks like kindness or something that looks like fire. Either way, it will be a trap. We have to bring one more voice into this room before he springs it." She looked at Ash, the hospital lab, the switch. "The truth about your blood. The only person who can close that door is the doctor who signed the false report. I have sent for him under court summons. He is on his way with a marshal escort." Knock sounded on the inner door. The clerk peeked in. "The marshal has arrived," she said, "and the doctor is with him." Imani nodded. "Bring them," she whispered. Ash felt his hands tremble. The capsule in his pocket blinked its last green heartbeat and went dark. The door opened. A man in a white coat stepped in, his face gaunt, eyes bruised by sleeplessness. He looked at Ash and flinched as if he had seen a ghost. The marshal closed the door. Imani spoke softly. "Dr. Levin, you were called to explain a test that changed a life," she said, "and to answer under oath whether you signed it freely." Levin swallowed. His gaze flicked to Mara, then to Ash, then to the floor. His hands shook. His voice came out a whisper. "I signed what was put in front of me because my child was taken that morning on her way to school, and a voice told me she would come home if the numbers came out clean for the wrong man." He lifted his head at last, tears burning tracks down his face. "I am sorry," he said, and the word carried the weight of a city. Before anyone could breathe, a siren wailed outside, short and hard, the sound of something breaking free. The clerk ran in pale-faced. "There is smoke in the lobby," she cried. "Someone has set a fire at the front entrance to force an evacuation." Imani turned to Ash and Mara, her voice iron. "Do not move until I return," she said. Then she strode toward the hall with the marshal. Ash looked at Mara. Mara looked at the dark capsule in his hand, and the smoke alarm howled again as footsteps pounded closer from both sides of the building, one set meaning help, the other set meaning the next trap. And Ash knew the choice at the heart of everything had arrived again. The smoke crept under the door like a secret slipping into the room. The heat from the hallway pushed against the back of Ash's neck. Mara stepped closer to him, her eyes never leaving the door. She had seen this before. She knew the difference between fire that could be stopped and fire that would burn through everything. Ash clenched his fists, his fingers digging into the side of the capsule still in his pocket. The green light had died, but the weight of it, of the things it promised, lingered heavy in his chest. Footsteps rang through the corridor. Hurried, chaotic, a different kind of alarm. The fire wasn't the only thing coming for them. He could feel the shift in the air, the pressure building like a storm waiting to break. The judge had been quick, too quick. She'd filed the emergency order. But now Ash felt like they were trapped in the space between seconds, when everything is falling, but it hasn't hit the ground, yet Mara's voice broke through his thoughts. "Stay close," she whispered, and Ash nodded without thinking. Her hand found his, steady, firm, a lifeline. He had never felt the weight of her touch like this before, as though she were not just guiding him, but carrying him through the storm that had been building since the night he had found his mother's confession. There was a soft knock at the door. A voice, low but urgent. "Judge Kaur, we have a situation." In the lobby, Marshal Green said that you need to see this. Imani's voice cut through the crack. "I'm coming. Stay inside and lock the door behind me. The marshal and the doctor are with me. Do not leave until I return." Ash could hear the faintest tremor in her tone, a whisper of something wrong, something bigger than they had prepared for. His heart raced as the seconds stretched. His mind went to the clinic, to the blood test, to the doctor who had signed the fake report. Levin had been forced into it. But there was more here than just a simple lie. Something had changed. The pieces were coming together. But the truth was still too far out of reach. The door swung open, and Ash's breath caught in his throat. Two men stood in the hallway, uniforms dark, faces blank, and the moment stretched, the air thick with a tension that threatened to snap. The taller man spoke first, his voice calm, controlled. "Judge Kaur, we have orders to escort you and your witnesses to a safer location. There's been a breach in the building." The other man didn't speak. His eyes never left Ash, a cold calculation in them. The first man stepped into the room. Marshal Green's eyes met Imani's, his gaze flickering from the judge to Ash, then to Mara. She gave a barely perceptible nod, the kind of nod that only someone who had been through hell with you would understand. Mani didn't move, her hand still resting lightly on the doorframe. She looked at Ash, then at Mara, and her eyes hardened. "There's no need for escort," she said. "We'll take our own way out. Thank you." But the first man didn't budge. He stepped closer, his voice low. "We're under direct orders, ma'am. The building has been compromised, and the situation is deteriorating fast." Ash felt the shift in the air. Something in the way the man's words hung in the room, the familiar tension he had felt the night he was thrown out of his father's mansion, the same cold dread that told him someone was pulling strings behind the scenes, trying to cut off their escape before it even began. Mara squeezed his hand tighter. Don't trust them, she whispered, her voice a breath. The judge's eyes flickered. To Ash, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke. No, we won't be leaving this building. We will stay right here until everything is resolved. The man didn't move. His stance didn't change, but there was something in the way his eyes narrowed, a shift in his posture, as though he had just received an order. And the air grew heavier. Ash felt the weight of that moment, the second where everything could fall apart. The second man shifted, his fingers brushing the holster at his side, and Ash's heart pounded. The tension stretched taut, the world hanging on a thread. It's not safe for you here, the second man said, his voice as cold as steel. We have our orders, and you need to come with us. Now Ash stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. A ripple of recognition passed through him. Something familiar, something dangerous, but his mind was already racing. There was no time to hesitate. He couldn't allow them to take them away. Not now, not when they were so close. His fingers brushed the pendant around his neck, the same pendant that had unlocked the key to his mother's secret, the same pendant that had led them to the truth. And in that moment, Ash knew what he had to do. He took a deep breath, steeled himself, and stepped between the two men. His body tense but his mind clear. They will not take anyone anywhere, he said, his voice low but firm. We are not leaving this room until I say so. The man who had spoken first hesitated, the slightest flicker of surprise crossing his face. Then it was gone, replaced with a cold smile. You are in no position to make demands, he said, his hand reaching for his radio. Ash's eyes didn't leave him. His mind raced, his body poised for action, but something held him back, a deeper instinct telling him to wait. To watch. The seconds stretched. He could feel the air growing thicker, the sound of footsteps echoing in the hallway, the hum of tension rising like a storm. The first man spoke into his radio, the words low and steady. We need backup, now. The signal is compromised. And then it happened. The door slammed open behind them, and Ash's heart skipped a beat. Imani stepped into the room, her face calm but her eyes blazing with purpose. Enough, she said, her voice carrying the weight of the law. You will leave this building immediately, or I will have you removed by force. The two men froze, their eyes flicking between Imani and Ash. Imani stepped forward, her hand outstretched toward the door. The marshals will handle this, she said, her voice cool, but beneath it was the steel of authority. You are no longer needed here. The men didn't move, their gaze lingering on Ash, but after a long moment, they slowly turned and walked out, the door shutting behind them with a soft click. Ash exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, and Mara reached out to steady him. Imani turned to them, her face softening. We don't have much time, she said. We need to move quickly before they realize what we've done. But first, there's something you need to understand. Nodded, his mind still racing. What? He asked. Imani's expression turned serious. There are more eyes on you now than you know, Ash. Rowan has spent years building his empire of lies. But it's not just the money or the power. It's the connections, the influence, the way he controls people from the shadows. But what he doesn't realize is that you've already won. You have the truth. Ash shook his head. It doesn't feel like I've won, he said. My father Victor, he's in danger, and I still don't know what's really going on. I don't even know if I can trust what's in this file. You can trust the file, Imani said, but trust yourself more. She handed him a set of documents. This is the final piece, the lab report that shows the true results of your paternity test. It's in Rowan's hands now, but it won't be for long. Ash took the documents, his fingers trembling. The truth was right there in his hands, and yet it felt like he was standing on the edge of something even bigger. Something that could change everything. There's one last thing, Imani said, her voice quiet. The judge will hear your case tomorrow, Ash, but you must be ready. Rowan will try to make a move before you can reach the court. You have to be one step ahead. Mara looked at Ash, her eyes fierce. We will be, she said, together. We'll finish this. Imani nodded. Then she turned toward the door. Go, she said, and remember, the only thing Rowan can't control is the truth. Take it with you, and make sure the world sees it. Ash and Mara left the room, the door clicking shut behind them. The weight of the truth heavy in Ash's chest, but now, with the documents in hand, he felt a new fire building inside him, a fire that would burn through the lies. They stepped into the hallway, the world outside still quiet, but not for long, and Ash knew that the next step would be the hardest. But it would also be the one that finally freed him, freed them all. As they walked toward the door, Ash's mind raced with possibilities, with the knowledge that everything he had ever known was about to change, and for the first time in his life, he felt ready to face whatever came next, because the truth was no longer a burden, it was his weapon, and he would use it to tear down everything that had been built on Liz together. They would bring it all to light, no matter the cost. The moment Ash stepped outside the courthouse annex, the city stretched before him, still and silent. Like a battlefield waiting for the first move, his heart thundered in his chest, but his mind was clearer than it had ever been. The weight of the documents in his hand, the truth about his paternity, about his mother's last plea, It all felt like a chain binding him to something much larger than his own pain, larger than his own fear. Mara walked beside him, her eyes scanning the streets with a sharpness that told him she was already planning their next move. Every step they took was measured, calculated. She didn't look at him, but he felt her presence like a constant, steady reminder that they were in this together. The truth was out, but Rowan's influence still loomed like a dark cloud over everything. Ash knew that the file was just the beginning, the final piece to a puzzle that had taken years to build, and now he held the key to its destruction. We have to move fast, Mara said, her voice low. They'll know soon enough what we have. Rowan will make his play, and when he does, we have to be ready to fight back. Ash nodded, his mind still running through the pieces of the plan. The chip, the video, the truth about his blood. It all felt like a storm waiting to break. The city around him seemed to hold its breath, the calm before the chaos. A car screeched around the corner, its headlights cutting through the dark. Ash tensed, his fingers tightening around the file. But the car slowed as it approached. A familiar face leaned out the window. It was a assistant. Get in, she said, her voice urgent. The police are on their way. We don't have much time. Mara didn't hesitate. She opened the door and slid in beside Ash. He followed, his heart still pounding. They had done it, they had exposed the truth, but now they had to face the fallout. The car sped off, the lights flashing past. Ash glanced back at the courthouse, the building now just a silhouette in the distance. Behind it, the city stretched out like a labyrinth, its streets dark and winding, full of hidden dangers. The assistant drove quickly, taking turns that cut through the city's heart. Winding past quiet streets, down alleys, and through the outskirts, Ash's thoughts raced. He had made it this far, but he couldn't help but feel the weight of what was still to come. Rowan wouldn't give up without a fight. He knew that now, and there were still so many unanswered questions, so many lies that hadn't been exposed. He had the documents, but what good were they without the right people to back him up? Without the right allies to turn the tides? The car stopped abruptly, and Ash's heart skipped a beat. The assistant turned in her seat, her expression serious. This is it, she said. We'll wait here until the safe house is cleared. Ash nodded, his eyes scanning the area. A rundown warehouse on the edge of town, the kind of place that looked abandoned but held secrets in its walls. He stepped out of the car and looked around, his breath visible in the cool night air. This is where the real battle begins, he thought. They entered the warehouse cautiously, the assistant leading them through the back door, and into a room that looked like a makeshift command center. Computers lined one wall, maps and documents pinned up across the other. Imani was waiting for them, her face drawn, but her eyes sharp. She looked up as they entered. You've made it, she said. And there's no turning back now. She nodded to the table where a projector hummed quietly, casting a blue light across the room. The screen flickered to life, showing the image of the city, the layout of the buildings, the police precincts, and the private properties that had been bought up by Hale Industries over the years have been tracking Rowan's movements. Imani continued, her voice steady. He's already sent out the word. The authorities are on their way to arrest you, Ash, but they'll never find you here. We have time to make one last move. Ash glanced at Mara, who had her arms crossed, her eyes scanning the maps on the screen. She looked back at him, and for a moment, he could see the same fear in her eyes that he had felt in his own. But it was a different kind of fear now, the fear of what they were about to do. What's the plan? Ash asked. Imani stepped forward. We take the truth to the people. The world needs to know what Rowan has been doing, what Hale Industries has been hiding. But we can't just hand over the documents. We have to make sure that everything is seen, everything is heard. Ash's mind raced. What does that mean? It means that we need to control the narrative, she said. And we need to make sure that Rowan can't bury the story. We take everything we have and put it on every platform. We make it public, we make it viral. The air in the room shifted, and Ash felt a sudden rush of adrenaline. They had always been a step behind, but now, with the truth in their hands, they had the power to turn the tables. But there was one more thing, Imani said, her voice quiet but firm. Rowan won't go down without a fight, and when he fights, he doesn't fight fair. She was right, Ash thought. Rowan had already proven that. He had manipulated people, controlled the media, buried evidence, and destroyed lives. He would do whatever it took to keep his empire intact. We need a weapon, Mara said, and Ash looked at her, confused. A weapon, Imani clarified. Not a gun, not a bomb, but something more powerful. Something that Rowan can't control. Ash felt a chill run down his spine. He understood what she was getting at. The weapon was the truth, but it was more than that. They needed a way to expose everything, to make sure that the lies could no longer survive in the shadows. What do you need from us? Ash asked. Imani didn't hesitate. I need you to be the face of this. Ash, I need you to stand up, to speak, to tell the world what you know. He swallowed, his throat tight, the weight of it pressed against him like a mountain, but he knew what he had to do. The time for running was over. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady now. Good, Imani said, because we don't have much time, and once we go public, there's no turning back. Rowan will come after you with everything he has, but this time, we'll have the truth on our side. The plan was set, the pieces were falling into place, but Ash couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a fight that would take everything they had. He glanced at Mara, who gave him a small, but determined smile, and he knew she would fight beside him until the end. Imani turned to the assistant. "Prepare the broadcast," she said. "Make sure we have everything ready to go live. The whole world needs to see this." The assistant nodded, and within moments the room was filled with the soft hum of technology. Ash looked at the screen, at the file that held his future, and at the files that could destroy everything Rowan had built. The world was about to change, and Ash knew, deep in his heart, that the truth would be the thing that finally set them free. He took a deep breath and stepped in front of the camera, the bright light illuminating his face. His heart was steady. Now, the fear that had once held him captive had been replaced by something stronger, something unstoppable. And as the broadcast began, Ash spoke, his voice clear, his words sharp. "My name is Ash Hale, and I'm the son of a woman who was silenced by the men who controlled the truth. But I'm here to make sure that truth is heard, loud and clear, for everyone to hear, for everyone to see. This is our story, and it's not over yet." The camera clicked, the light flickered, and the world was about to watch the truth unfold, one broadcast at a time. And for the first time in his life, Ash felt the weight of his name lift from his shoulders, replaced by the weight of something far greater, the power to fight back, the power to bring the truth into the light, no matter the cost. This was the beginning of something new, something that couldn't be erased by lies, something that would echo in every corner of the world. And as the camera rolled, Ash knew that no matter what happened next, they had already won, because the truth had finally found its voice. The end.